Hey guys, Bart from TST Industries here. Welcome to TST Garage. Today in the shop we have a Yamaha FZ-10. It's a brand new model, still has all the OEM components. As you can see, we have a behemoth fender still on the bike. So in this video we will be demonstrating the installation of some fender elimination components on that bike. For your viewing pleasure, we have the TST Industries Fender Eliminator. There's a simple bracket that removes all of this junk and provides a place for you to remount your license plate. On top of that, you'll need to do something about your signaling system. So one of the options will be an OEM signal relocation bracket that will bring these guys behind your license plate mount, get them a little bit more narrow, and it's the simplest and most cost-effective way to achieve this. The other options will be a mounting kit along with R-pod signals. For this bike, we have a couple different types. Whatever you choose, it's the same mounting kit. You could also opt to get the OEM harness converters. One side will plug into the signals via bullet connectors. The other side has the OEM style plug on it. So really simple connection there, no fuss. Choice is up to you. We'll demonstrate both setups. Now you also need to take into consideration the fact that you are removing your license plate light, and therefore you will not have your license plate lit. For those guys that decide that they want to go with a license plate light, we have a really nice stealth system that almost disappears behind the license plate, still provides ample amount of light, connects really simply. We'll show you how to include that in this installation. Now, what I want to stress is that all of these parts are sold a la carte, so you will make the package that best suits your needs on our website, and then use this video, chunks of it, to best suit your installation. All right, so now let's jump onto the bike and start tearing it down. So in step one, we'll remove the fasteners off our license plate, retain them for use later, and then we will move on to the removal of the seat. In the next step, we will be removing some fasteners off the bike. We have a 6mm Allen here, and also on the opposite side in the same location, we have a 4mm Allen up top and 2 Phillips heads. Once these are out, this piece of bodywork can be removed. Now we have access under here to the next 4 fasteners we will need to remove. These will require an 8mm hex. Now the bracket containing the seat latch will come out, and we can focus on the 4 fasteners that are 10mm hex that attach this fender assembly to the bike. Now let's disconnect the taillight here. Press this tab in, pull out, pretty simple. Grab a 10mm socket and unscrew this nut and the one right under here. Now I'm able to remove this taillight off the bike and go on to this bundle of wiring here. There's a wire tie here. You could either choose to undo it with a tiny screwdriver like this, or cut it off and have to replace it later. Once these wires are free here, I'm going to have to identify the license plate light plug. Going to disconnect this. And then these two, there's a black and a white. And now all our wires leading into the fender assembly are completely free. So we can ditch these two 10mm nuts here. When I get to the last one, I support the fender from the bottom so it doesn't just drop. Now the fender is off. Now I have the OEM fender on the table in front of me for two reasons. One, this particular bike has a key cover that articulates like this, and we can reuse that on our setup if we trim away some of the length off of it, and then it ends up clamping in place like this, and you still make use of that cover. If you're not going to be doing that, if you're okay with the voids left behind, then you can skip this step. The other reason why I have this thing in front of me is because I'll be taking off the OEM signals for the purpose of showing you guys how they get remounted on our bracket along with the system. If you're not doing any of these steps, you can just fast forward to the next section. All right, first step here, we have 4 fasteners that will use a 4mm Allen. We will not be reusing those, so we can put them to the side. Now on the inside here we have 4 Phillips head fasteners that we will be removing. Now this bracket comes out, and this bracket is pretty much free here. And now this component will move around like this. It does have some ramping features here that we can pop out using a really small flathead screwdriver. It just comes right out. So this bracket comes off, and we have all of these wires now free. One thing to notice before we move forward, the left signal is black, the right signal is white. All right, so now we'll need to remove the signals. They do have these pieces that pry away from a rubber boot type feature. I can demonstrate this a little bit better once I have this off the bike, so bear with me here, guys. Now we will pry back on the signal like this, and it will expose a little window right about here. We could jam a screwdriver into and pry up on the whole system, and it gets dislodged and it's free to come out. Now this jam piece has to go through first, and then all the wiring will come out. As promised, I'm going to quickly demonstrate how this works. In its locked position, the signal is through the plastic components that constrain it in place, and this piece jams it in place like this, having little wing features that penetrate through this rubber portion. So to get it out, pry back on this portion here, the flexible rubber portion, and pop out this jam component, and that frees it. I'm going to repeat the procedure on the other side. All right, now we can put all of these components to the side and ponder what's next. So now let's make this whole assembly look a little bit more like the one that I've done already for the purpose of installation with our whole setup here. This gets placed on top and gets clamped in between the surface of our mounting pad of the Fender Eliminator and the undertail of the bike. So we'll first need to go to the top side and cut away on this feature here. For the purpose of doing that, I've chosen an angle cutter, diagonal cutter. This really makes it the simplest and provides really good results. Once I cut away at it, I will use a utility knife to go over that cut and smooth it out. All right, and now I have a nice cut here on the top side, and then we'll go to the bottom. So the length from this wall here should be approximately 450 thousandths of an inch. That's about 15-30 seconds, or for you guys that use metric, it's about 11.5 millimeters. You use any measuring device at your disposal. I choose to use a vernier caliper. Provides the best results. I'll mark it off and then I'll chop it. Now I want to stress the reference point again. I'm measuring from this wall feature here. That's this one away to where I marked it. Now I'm going to make use of a box cutter type knife to slice through it. I go over and over until I get a nice straight cut, and then I penetrate through. All right, now I can fit this piece in here and check it for fitment. And I think I did a pretty good job. I'm just gonna clean up the edge a little bit. You can actually use a file for this portion and get a really nice smooth edge here. It's not really visible from the exterior of the bike, but I know some guys want to get really in depth with their installation and have a perfect setup. So a file here will produce the right results. I'm going to test fit it again. It looks really, really good, right on the money. We do have a half circle in this location here. This is for the purpose of routing our wires. Now, if you're using the Yamaha OEM wires, you'll notice that they're encased in a shielding sleeve that is pretty thick. So we'll need to make a little bit more room here by cutting away on some of this plastic to make a larger opening here for the wires. So on the bottom, you have a little gusset here. I'm just going to cut away at an angle and then cut away at an angle here. Let me just draw this for you guys so you have a better way of visualizing it. Okay, so the area I've marked with yellow will be cut away, and that will give us more access for the wires. This is made of polypropylene, so it cuts really, really nicely. You'll be tempted to use a Dremel or a hacksaw, and that's fine, but a knife works really, really well too. So let's test it again. I think I have a nice amount of access space to pass my wires through, and now we can throw this entire assembly onto the bike and move forward from there. Before I do that, I do want to pre-configure my OEM signals on this bracket here. So I'm going to ditch this cutting table and we'll move forward from there. Okay, so like I said before, black is left, white is right. So that's the left side of the bike. This is the right side of the bike. And this bracket will be configured like so. So the larger diameter of the opening will go towards the rear of the bike. We'll need to pass the wiring through first. Then our fastener. And this is where it gets interesting. So there's no flex in this because it's anodized aluminum. You will just need to work this in with patience. The signal boot is split towards the rear, so that does make it a little bit easier. You can use a small flathead screwdriver to get the ridge of that boot inside. Just be careful not to puncture it. And there it is. Now it's mounted. Let's fasten it in place with this jam fastener. And just repeat the steps on the other side. All right, so this is ready to go. Our bracket is ready to go. This will attach in this configuration. The rearmost holes are going to align with these slots here. Our hardware provided for the kit consists of 4 washers, 2 longer screws, and 2 shorter screws. Longer screws go through this whole setup like so, protrude through the top of the subframe, and then get capped off with the 10mm hex nuts that we took off in the removal of the OEM setup. The rear screws go, the smaller screws rather, go through the forwardmost holes and get capped off with the same hardware. So now I'll just perform this on the bike and we'll go from there. Okay, so I've configured my setup here the way I showed you guys on the table. Now I'm going to make use of the forwardmost holes and our shorter fasteners to get this thing started onto the bike. First we need to get the signal wires up into the sub tray. Having a helping hand from a friend would be really good here, but we don't have that luxury. Once we get those first 2 screws up in there and start the threads, this whole installation is going to be self-supporting. And we can move on to the rear screws, which are the longer ones and penetrate through our signal bracket and into our fender eliminator. And now we will need the tail light. Tail light needs to go back on because these holes here align with the screws we are putting in this step. Okay, so our screws on the bottom need a 4mm Allen, and the nuts on the top are 10mm hex. Turn them in, snug them up just a little bit. We don't want to over tighten them just yet. I want to preserve some adjustability so we can center this assembly. Looks nicely centered now. I'm going to go ahead and take the rearmost fasteners rather, to full tightness. Now let's tighten down the forward fasteners. Plug the taillight in. And at this point, we can test out our signals. I'm just going to plug them in where they came out of. Everything seems a-okay. Now, if you're not installing a license plate light on your setup, at this point, you would just go in the reverse order of disassembly. Everything is pretty much back to normal here with the addition of our Fender Eliminator and the bracket to relocate your signals. I am going to install our Stealth license plate light kit on this setup. It is an optional kit. Most people opt to get it, so we'll get it captured here for you guys. At this point, we can start wiring up this Stealth license plate light. I'm going to stretch out the wire, and I'm going to feed it through the center triangle of our webbed cutouts here. This will ensure that this license plate light lives in the proper place here. And then I'm going to feed the wire up to the top into the sub tray through the access area that we left. All right, and now I'm just going to milk out the slack. You don't want to milk out too much slack and get it all nice and tight here. That's not the point here. We need to leave just a little bit for the wire to have breathing room. Also going to tighten up my signals at this point. All right, that looks nice. Now up top we have all this excess. We will deal with that in just a little bit. I'll show you how to connect it. Let's just mechanically attach this license plate here. I typically don't make use of the double-sided adhesive here, but if you're the kind of person that needs to have that peace of mind, you can do that. I've attached a bunch of these on all different bikes and never have an issue. And this is 3M high bond adhesive, same stuff that automakers use to bond a bunch of things together. I know Boeing uses that for some paneling inside their aircraft. So it is a reputable means of attachment. I'm going to get the license plate on. Just make sure that it's centered before I tighten it down. All right, we're good here. Now we can jump up top, make all the connections, finalize all the neatening up we need to do post-assembly, and then go into the reverse order of disassembly here to finish it up. All right, so now let's get our wiring here squared away. I'm gonna put our license plate light wire off to the side. I'm gonna identify the plug for our license plate light here, pull it up, and then I'm going to put all of these signaling harness components underneath all of that. This way we have our license plate light set up on top and not in our way. Now we have a little bit of extra bulk here since all of this wire used to live inside the fender, so we'll have to manage that bulk in here. That looks pretty good. You can try to make use of the wire tie that we removed in a previous step, or like me, you can choose to use a new one. It's vastly easier to just use a new one. As you get all this wiring nice and neat here and all these routing guides, go ahead and cinch it down, and you can cut off the excess. Now we can focus on just the license plate light wire. Now we have all this excess. You could bunch it up and tie it together, but I'm going to choose to trim it off a little bit. then I'm going to have to split the shielding on it. And now this length is much more manageable. So we provide these nice connectors that don't require any tools for making connection with our kits, and these are really simple to use, and also they enable you to install and uninstall multiple times without harming anything. So we'll make use of those in our installation. I'm going to choose to not reuse a portion of the wire from the fender and just get into the wiring here. All right, so now we have exposed wires. We can separate them. Now we will undo the larger diameter cap from our connector, expose the little pin that makes our connection into this. Slip it over that wire. And then screw the other portion onto that. You don't really need to over tighten this, just get it snug and kept in place. I'll repeat the procedure with this connector on the other wire. I'm going to take the cap, the smaller diameter cap, off of the connector that is on the black wire. I need to strip off some of this shielding here. I'm going to connect the black wire from our license plate light into this setup. As you tighten it down, give it a little tug. Looks good to go. We'll move on to the red side. All right, now I'm going to test it. Looks good to me. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and distribute the bulk of this wire under here. Make sure it's nice and neat and not in the trunk compartment. Now I'm going to move forward to the reinstallation of all the components that I took off in the first part of this installation, and then we'll be done. We're pretty much done with this setup. Powered up for you guys. You can see the license plate light is lit. All the functions still work. Left signal, right signal, and we're good to go. So now in the next segment, we'll just show you guys how to configure and install the TST Industries pod signals on this bike with this setup, and then we'll conclude and we'll be done. Now, in case you guys decided that you don't want to remount your OEM signals and you'd prefer to go with one of our different types of pod signals we manufacture here at TST Industries, I've backed up a couple steps on this bike to the point where I've stripped off the OEM signals and I mounted one of these here for you so I could demonstrate what they look like. And you can see very, very bright, sleek, small form factor. If you opt for the really minimal ones, they get even slimmer, also pack a big punch, so choice is yours. I'm going to show you guys how to pre-configure and install one of these on here, and the other one's just the opposite side but the same exact procedure. So it's really simple. I'm going to begin by taking the nut off the pod signal. I'm going to grab my hardware kit. Now my hardware kit only contains half of the hardware components because half were consumed on this side. So for one side installation, we'll have an L bracket, 2 washers, a screw, and a locking nut. In the beginning, we will only consider the L bracket. We have a slotted portion and a round hole portion. The slotted portion will go onto the stud protruding from our signal. We'll configure the setup in this way here. And I'm going to get the nut that came off the stud here, flange first onto the wires, get it on here. Snug it up, but don't tighten it all the way. We want to leave some adjustability here in the system. Now, we just need to mount it on the license plate bracket behind the license plate. So I'll remove the original hardware we had holding our license plate in place and mount up the signal using the remaining components from our hardware baggie. 1 washer on the outside, 1 washer on the inside. The nut caps off this bolted connection from the back. We'll make use of a 4mm Allen and a 10mm open-ended wrench. Bracket level. And tighten it down to the point where this won't move. Now I will make sure that our lens surface is perpendicular to the ground. And using a 14mm open-ended, I will tighten this down. Make sure not to over tighten this. You're preloading a rubber component here that prevents this from moving around and spinning. If you over tighten it, you run the risk of tearing that threaded component out of the rubber boot. All right, so that's really nice. And then we have the 2 wires sticking out of the backside of our stud. I'm going to run them to the inside. And I have them sticking out of the top. I'm going to make use of our optional harness converters because they just plug in to the bullet connectors on one end of the wire and provide us with a really nice plug-and-play connection to this whole system. So I'm going to go yellow to yellow, black to black, nice and simple. And we do have insulating caps on here, but they are free to move around, so we do need to lock them in place. I'm going to use some electrical tape. And basically just make sure that the conductors are covered. Lock them in place. And they'll prevent short circuits and headaches down the line. Just going to get a little bit extra tape here. I want to get full coverage over this insulator. And just like we plugged in the OEM signals in our previous segment of this video, we plug in here. Now white is the right side, and that's the side I'm working on right now. So that's where I'm going to plug this in. Tuck the wires away. Test it out. Right signal. Good to go. All right. The rest of this installation is pretty much the same. You reconstruct all the top side components in the reverse order of disassembly. We showed you that in a previous segment, so I'm not going to be redundant. One thing I want to note, here you still have some slack to these wires. I highly recommend that you use a small wire tie and tie it off to the back of your license plate bracket here for nice cable management and nice cosmetic appearance when the installation is complete. Other than that, this is pretty much done. Just wanted to show you guys how to perform these steps before we close out the video. All right, I don't know about you guys, I really enjoyed myself working on this motorcycle. It's really easy to deconstruct and reassemble, and the installation of our parts is really easy as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and consider checking out our website for more information and photos of this kit and other parts for this bike. It's tstindustries.com. I hope to see you guys there. Later.